Now this hack is a sound design hack, and this is a trick that you can use really with any software synthesizer you have available, but since we're all using Ableton Live, I decided to use Ableton's Operator Synth, which is actually an FM synthesizer, but it does a nice job emulating analog signal paths as well if you just change the routing scheme or the algorithm down here to this one. So I clicked on this global tab. If we click on this algorithm, what that's showing me is all four of these oscillators on the left side are separated. So in this situation, we can use it like a subtractive synthesizer. So anyway, I've just made a simple patch here with a saw wave on oscillator A. I've used a low pass filter to filter it down a little bit, and this is what it sounds like with a simple D minor chord progression. And it certainly doesn't sound bad, but it sounds very digital, very cold, as most software synthesizers tend to do. And what we want to do for this hack is add a little bit of analog life to the digital synths. And like I said, you can do this with any software or plug-in synthesizer you have, but I'm going to use a few of just the stock Ableton Live devices to breathe a little life into this and make it sound a little bit more analog. What we're kind of trying to emulate here is the way that analog oscillators would, subtly go out of tune and drift a little bit, so the pitch wouldn't always be perfect. And the first thing we can do to start to emulate that a little bit is to use one of the audio effects called chorus. And without getting into a huge long-winded explanation of what chorus does, here's sort of a quick version of the whole story here. What chorus is going to do is it's going to add a couple of delayed copies of the signal, and they're going to be delayed only by a very small amount. You can see here these two delays are 3 milliseconds and 7 milliseconds by default. And then those two delay copies are going to be time modulated, so it's going to give an effect kind of like a unison detune if you've ever used that on a different synthesizer before. So even just with the chorus off, here's the sound, and even just by turning it on, it adds a little bit more thickness to the sound. I'm going to just adjust this high pass control. I'm going to get most of the sound passing through the first delay. So already right off the bat, that's helping kind of thicken the sound up a little bit. But the next thing we're going to want to do is add a little bit of pitch movement or pitch drift. Let's go to this LFO section and let's turn it on. Now when you turn the LFO on, you've got two destinations here, destination A and destination B. And destination A is hardwired to control the pitch of the four oscillators. That's these four buttons here. We could also use it to control the filter cutoff. But let's just stick with the pitch for now. And if I were to play this back right now, we're going to hear some crazy pitch modulation happening all over the place as we're using a sine wave LFO shape with a pretty high amount, 25%, pretty decent amount dialed in there. And it's hard for us to tell what the pitches in these chords are anymore. So we don't really want to throw off the pitch by that much, but a little bit of subtle detuning here or subtle pitch drift is going to help us out. So the first thing I want to do is let's turn off this R button. That stands for retrigger of the LFO. And I just want the LFO to just kind of constantly be vibrating or cycling in the background. And with the retrigger button on, every time a new note is pressed, it's going to start its cycle over again. We just want it to kind of keep going. Let's also try changing the LFO's wave shape from a sine wave to a noise wave. And what that's going to do is just randomly generate an LFO wave. So it's just totally random. It's not like a consistent sine wave. It's not going to keep moving in a cyclical fashion that's repeatable over and over again. It's just going to randomly change positions. So now if we play it back again, let's turn the amount up so we really hear the effect here. Now the pitch is just absolutely all over the place. Just crazy. Okay, so the secret here is we're going to just dial this amount down. We want a little bit of amount, but not too much. So let's maybe start with something like, I don't know, 10%. Let's go here to the rate. This is the speed of how quickly it's going to change the position of the pitch. And let's start to turn the amount up more so we can really hear the effect. We'll kind of dial it in where it sounds nice to us. So getting up to about 30-40% is a little too much, so we'll dial it back. Perhaps we'll slow the rate down a little bit too. So now we're getting just this very subtle randomized offset of the pitch that's behaving in a way that an analog oscillator might behave. That's from an old synth, and circuitry has maybe seen better days. Now another thing we can do here is have this pitch drift happening in a slightly more predictable way by using one of the other LFO waves. Let's try a sine wave. And let's dial it in, or let's leave the settings we have dialed in and just see how it sounds, and then we'll go and further tweak it if we need to. So yeah, clearly too much pitch drift. So let's dial the amount back, maybe 8, 9, or 10%, somewhere in there. Let's maybe slow the rate down. And this is going to start to give us that kind of vaporwave-ish, almost tape drifting kind of sound. If you're listening to something on an old tape player and the reels aren't staying up to speed, this kind of like drifting back and forth, speeding up, slowing down kind of effect. I actually really like the sine wave for this type of effect with a little bit of pitch modulation dialed in. A little bit more. So let's kind of A-B this. Let's turn off the chorus. Let's turn off the LFO. Let's just see what we started with. Not a bad sound, but very mono, very cold, very digital sounding. The chorus is going to thicken it up, add a little stereo width. And then the LFO is going to add that little bit of pitch drift. Give us this really nice analog flavor of a sound. I'm liking the way that sounds. I think I might group these devices together, Command G, and maybe save this as an instrument rack for myself. But like I said, you can take any synth and use this trick, any synthesizer that has an LFO, low frequency oscillator. You can use it to modulate pitch a subtle amount. And if the synth has a built-in chorus effect, try using that. If not, just try adding Live's chorus. Does a great job giving you a little added thickness and a little added stereo spread to the synth signal. Hopefully this has been helpful, and have fun making your synths sound a little bit more analog. Take care.